Hi, my name is Daniela Silva. I'm the founder of ArLA. This is an interview that architects registered in Victoria and New South Wales have generously provided for us. These are based on their own experiences, but they are a valuable information that you can use to guide you through your own process. Enjoy.
Hi, my name is Anna. I'm based here in Melbourne. I did my registration through the APE process, and I'm originally from Mexico.
Hi, I'm Helena. I'm from Colombia. I've been here in Australia for 20 years, and I did my registration as an experienced practitioner through the skill process.
Hi, my name is Daniela Silva. I'm from Chile, and I did my registration process in New South Wales through the AP.
Hi, I'm Lucia. I'm from Ecuador, and I'm based in Melbourne, and I did the AP process through the skill assessment.
Okay, so what is the most important thing you recommend someone starting the process? One thing that I will say is to start. I think for me, it took me quite a little bit of time to decide to go for it. But then once you start going for it, you will realize that the process, even though it may look tedious, it also just flows. So my recommendation is start, find your facts. Don't rely on what people tell you what to do or not to do. Do your own research and go for it.
Yeah, I could also add that maybe also have time to prepare, because it's not like an easy process. It's very time consuming, and there's a lot of reading that you need to do. And I guess you need to have time to every week to prepare for that.
And also I feel that in my personal experience, having a study group was a very important thing. We support each other, not just with knowledge, but also with emotional support, because there are times that we think that, well, we can't do the process anymore, or we are overwhelmed, and then the other one is like, yeah, you can do it, and you keep going.
Yeah, definitely having a group that can help you support yourself. Never forget that you have to sleep well, eat well. Don't forget about yourself. But definitely action, I think, is what will take you there. So don't be afraid of starting to asking questions, and to be always with more people that can help you go through it.
How has your participation in networking groups as ArLA influenced your career? I was the founder of ArLA, and a lot of people will think that it's like a more hierarchic structure, that I'm teaching people, or I'm guiding people, mentoring people. But I've realized that I've got a lot from everyone, and I feel that it's a more horizontal relationship that throughout the different stages of my career, I've got support. Actually, the study group was from ARLA, so we could study in Spanish. We could explain in Spanish some topics that might be difficult to understand in English as a second language. So I believe that it was a fundamental part of my process to have this community. And I know that there are other ones, because I did the park, and there was also a study group for park, and then having conversations with other colleagues and with different backgrounds. I think it is important to connect during the process.
I think knowing that you are not alone doing what you are doing really helps. I feel that all these support groups are really there for you to use them. Sometimes we just doubt ourselves and think, oh, maybe this is for people that actually speak English, or maybe this is not for everyone. But they are actually for everyone. And I think thanks to them, I discovered new things. Thanks to them, I found out facts that in my research I couldn't. So having them around was fundamental for me with the process. The networking is also a good thing for us to do. For no people, you will find that this industry is actually a small industry. You will see that many people know each other from another job that they had, from another practice where they work. To start having a presence of us, like Latin architects doing it, is very important. I think our presence at this point of time is minimal in all those forums. So to have a voice there is very important. So go, attend, show up.
In my case, well, I knew about the group, but I didn't know you had like study group itself. However, I also did a park with Nicole, and then I was having some groups from there. Also, I was studying quite a bit with people at the office. That was very helpful for me. And I feel like I was the one pushing people to come with me and study, because everybody at work and in other spaces, they were more like quiet in general. And as you probably said, it's different when it's in your language. So I think I kind of suffered that a little bit. My strategy was I have to read a lot. I spent hours and hours reading by myself. Plus, it's not only the language barrier, which I feel confident enough talking and doing my job, but reading through terms that I've never heard before, like very law orientated, it was quite challenging. And in a way, I feel like I also needed my own time to do my research, to catch up with whatever everybody else was doing. And then when I get to study with someone, I had more specific questions. So for me, it was quite challenging, that part of doing it by myself, but also I sort of needed it to go in my own step and don't feel the pressure to do it.
I can agree with everyone. I think ArLA is the perfect support group to start your professional life in Australia, even though you might not have a job in the practice, but you can start to know how the process works, like what happens in the profession here, and like all these sort of paperwork that you need to do, that it's different from other countries. Like you can't use the term architect. It's like, well, like that was a big shock for me, of course, but it's something that, yeah, we need to learn, and we need to learn how things are done here. It's a good supporting and networking community. How can I identify the companies where my experience will be valid for the logbooks, and how does it work logging the hours? Okay, so it's talking about the logbook. Okay, so maybe for people that don't know what's the logbook is sort of a paper that you will log hours, experience hours in different criteria. So what a board is asking for you is to log. Normally they ask experience in the different phases of the project, and you need to put all those hours there. And my experience doing that, I think it was good to start a bit before actually applying to doing the application, because you will realize that you are missing hours, and like, because it's not like that easy, it's not like you really need to read all the document and make sure you have all those hours. So it's good to have that and to realize what projects you might need to get into, or what are you missing to do it. And some companies are pretty flexible to get you into that experience that you're missing. So I think it's important for you to start logging those hours. It's a bit of paperwork, because you need to sort of think, what did you do in each project? But after doing that, I guess it's just one time that you will do it. So it's all right.
And I think I agree with you that talking to your team, or talking to your manager about what you are about to start, it is important that you communicate that you are planning to do this, so then you can get exposed to the different phases. And a very important thing that might vary for Victoria, but at least in New South Wales, you can identify architectural firms just by using the name architect. Those are the companies that you should be looking for to start doing your logbook. It's not impossible to do it without them, but it's very helpful. It's very valuable that your process is done with the supervision of a registered architect. You can also learn from them a lot, and developing your statement and logbook, they also have to check all of that. So if they are not aware of the process, they haven't been through the process, it's harder to get guidance.
And also, I think it's very important to mention in the interview what you are doing. Like, be clear and don't be scared to sort of say, listen, I am trying to put my registration together and I just want to make sure that I got the support in this office to do it. Many architectural practice, they want more architects.
I think in my experience, every time I've been in job interviews or when I went to this interview in this practice I'm at the moment, they always ask, are you interested to become architect? So coming back to the question itself, I don't think there is like a list where you can find, oh, these are the good practices or bad practices. It's very depending on what you are looking for. Do you research of what sort of practice I want to see myself in, what sort of work I want to do? I think that's very important to know. And yeah, there is not like a magic list to say, oh, this company is good for this and this company is good for that, or your skills are better here or better there. I think it's more like a personal journey as well. You have to find yourself in different places, different positions. You will always learn something different for each place. And when you feel like you probably don't have more to give or more to receive, maybe it's when we all say, okay, maybe I want to try something else. How long did it take you to register? And what are the steps and associated costs? Well, in terms of cost, it depends when you do it, because every year they change the price as well. So always check on the boards what's the price, or always go and refer to the ACC to understand as well what's your own pathway. For me, the process to get registered, like the whole thing, if I consider from my step one of validation of my studies, it was like 2 years. I went through the validation of my overseas qualifications. I started in 2022. And I did first my skill assessment as such with the step 1 and step 2. Then after I passed that period, I kept working and getting some working experience. And then I started the logbook. After doing the logbook, I got in through the process of the registration. Then I did my exam. Then I did my interview. So that's kind of like in a nutshell, the whole process. Every person will take different time depending how fast or how intense you want to do it. And again, the cost will always be depending on the timing you are doing it, or how many steps you have to go through.
I feel that my process in many ways was longer than what it should have been. And that was just because I decided to be a mom in the middle of it. So that in a way made it a little bit longer because it wasn't my priority. So I did it through the experienced practitioner. And that was one that it took me quite a while to discover that I had that option. Because I thought about it for so long. I also kept working and putting more projects here down in Melbourne. Then I discovered all of a sudden that I was actually eligible to do it that way. In many ways, many people see it as easier because you don't have to go and do the logbook, you don't have to go any of those steps. It's sort of you jump through that, but at the same time, you have to demonstrate that you have worked at an executive level in 5 projects. And me, without realizing, because of all the delays that I had along the process, I realized that I was eligible for it. That meant that when it happened, it was quite quickly. It was quickly in the way that my projects were done and finished. All I have to do was talk about how all the competencies were actually ticked off because of those projects. And then just the interview. The interview is a special interview that happens for a specific this assessment. No one can tell you how it is except their experience, but that doesn't mean that that's the truth or your truth. You just go through it. My interview was quite friendly and simple, and I just got it. In terms of the price, I feel that was back then was like around $3,000, something like that. But back then, my practice paid it for me, and they paid for the cost of putting it out there, because at the end of the day, they will benefit from me getting registered. So that's how it was. So again, no, there is no one size fits all, but it's just everyone does their own thing at their own time. But at the end, you get there.
Yeah, I think it's a very important thing. And there are a lot of companies that in the moment that you are doing the interviews, they said, if you're interested in doing the registration, we will cover the cost. In some other cases, you need to cover them because it's your personal challenge and the company doesn't need it. They can partially pay. In my case, I decided to do it independently. It was my personal goal. I started with the skills assessment. My experience is a bit untraditional, to say it in some way. I worked for companies like Sydney Airport, where I was on the client side, not the architect side. After I left the airport, my goal was the next company has to be eligible for me to log hours. So that's how I decided to move to a residential practice, a thing that I never did before. The skills assessment was around over $3,000. I didn't study anything here. I did all my studies in Chile. Here it was validated fully as a bachelor and master's because I did 6 years of studies in Chile, which was a surprise for me because a lot of people go through I want to do the master's degree thinking that you don't have a master's degree, instead of going through the skills assessment that is not easy, but it's doable and it's more affordable. And you end up having your master's anyway. So that was the first step. And then I did the APE. There was another cost associated with the course to prepare the part 2, and then the cost of the part 1 and 2 of the APE, and then the part 3. I think that was another $2,000. So it is a quite expensive process, but I think I was strategic enough to get at the end like a more seamless process. Still feeling proud of my other background, all the other years of experience. So I think it was overall something worth it.
I have a similar experience to Dani and Anna. I did all my studies overseas, and normally they ask for 5 years of bachelor, and then you can do the skill assessment. So there are 2 parts of all the thing to become an architect, right? Like it's the skill assessment if you study overseas, and also the registration. So it's 2 separate processes. Like the skill assessment also has different parts, like the logbook, not logbook, but the portfolio, interview, and other paperwork you need to do. And that's only to validate your studies, overseas studies. And then the registration is to become registered, and it's actually a process that also Australians need to do. So, and in this process is the logbook, the exam, and there's an interview also at the end. And I think similar cost as Dani was saying, like $3,000 for the skill assessment and another $1,000 for registration. And I also did the part course to develop all that knowledge that we actually don't get.
That also fills the gaps, I will say, and so it is worth it.
Yes, because if you don't study here, to be honest, you don't know how things work and how are the rules around, and that's why registration is also good, because you will develop all that knowledge to actually build projects here.
I was trying to talk. I didn't want to interrupt. I was like, please give me a break.
What are the benefits of registration for employees, not business owner? Is it worth it? The simple answer is yes, it's definitely worth it. And I will do it again, even as hard as it was and as sometimes painful that it was. I feel that and we have talked about this many times, it gives certainty, and certainty for everyone. It gives safety to everyone, it gives security. So I would say that the process is definitely worth going through it, and the benefits are many. At least where I work, just to sort of one that is very measurable, is that the registered architects get paid more than the ones that are not registered. So that's a plus. A plus is also that you get the benefits if your office is part of the Australian Institute of Architects. You get to attend to all these seminars and all those things, so that's another benefit. But I would say that in general, it's all the doors that could open your way and all the experience that you could sort of gain just because you have the registered architect as a title. So the short answer is yes, it's definitely worth it.
It is an interesting question because a lot of times people think that if you're not opening your own practice, it's not worth having your registration. But this is something that it protects the public. When you go to the doctor in Australia, there is a register of doctors that you know that person went through all the steps to become a doctor, so then you can go and trust this practitioner, and if something happens, you are protected by law to go and sue and do whatever if something goes wrong. And the same thing happens for architects. So there is an Architects Act that protects the public. A lot of people might think that is about protecting the architect, but it gives the architect a standard of competency and everything that we need to comply with to provide the best services for the public. Architects have a lot of responsibility in the construction industry. Our decisions can make lives being in danger and things like that. So it gives you better understanding of the processes. It makes you more efficient because you will pick any mistake like earlier instead of waiting for your supervising architect to say this is not wrong. It makes you more independent as a worker, even though you are protected by a company, or you will still have some responsibility. And I think that the process is worth it. And it's also, for many years, I was told that it was impossible to do it. Don't even try, because no one has ever got the registration with a Latin American background. And this is one of the reasons why we're doing this interview, is because we want to pass that message that it is possible. There are different paths to do the process. It is an individual process, so then my experience won't really help 100% another, but can give some guidance, at least in my case. Made me feel that more in power of my decisions in the office. So yeah, totally worth it.
I think one thing that I forgot to answer is that there are many jobs that unless you are registered, you are not able to do it. And that's simple. The job that I got at this point in my life, I wouldn't be able to have it if I wasn't registered. And it didn't matter if the company is registered and you are covered by the insurance of them. Doesn't make a difference. Part of the job description was you must be a registered architect. And in that sense, it's good in the way that it opens a lot of doors.
Yeah, you can get a more hierarchic positions, leadership positions. You can still do it without the registration, but I believe that it will make you more confident to have this backup.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely gives you more opportunities. As they are saying, there are many jobs that only require an architect to occupy the position. And also, I guess you will be able to use the word architect. Like,
Correct.
if you're not registered, you simply can't be called an architect. You just might be a designer or graduate, who knows? But
Technician.
yeah,
I was called architectural technician, which is not bad, but it also puts you in a different position.
For registration, it's a really good knowledge to learn, because it's all about contracts that not only protects the public but also protects you with clients. And it's also really important to know, because there are many developers and people that try to push your hand a little bit. So it's also to protect you and what you do, and also maybe liability, what things you might be liable with, and how to get an insurance, all these kind of things that might not seem, they're really important, right? It might not seem that important if you're working in a company, but it will definitely be important at some point.
In my case, of course, I think it was worth it because it was a goal I proposed to myself. When they told me, same as Danny, like, oh, no one has done it. Like, you didn't even study here in Australia. You might not even gonna get close. Like, don't think about it. Like, don't dream. And I actually didn't look at that option for many years. And then when I was like still having my professional experience, I was doing pretty much the same things, not the same, but definitely similar things. So I was getting an understanding of the whole process. I was like, I'm missing out something. I need to do it. And I need to try at least, even if I don't get till the end, but I need to try and see what I am missing out. And that's when I realized some other people has done it. I didn't know about people from Latin America, but I knew about people from Europe or from other places. I was like, why is it different to us, or why can I not do it? Then when I start asking the questions, I also start finding answers and ways of doing it. So when I went through the process, even though, as we mentioned already, it's a bit challenging itself, I was finding a lot of reward of saying, okay, I actually can find answers. And at work also, I start finding that, I'm actually understanding a bit better this process or what they are saying. I was talking to some friends the other day, and we mentioned that even when you are speaking English, you already know lots of vocabulary and you hear all the words. But then once you listen or read or know about a new word, that you're like, oh, what is a new word? Like you learn that new word that you haven't heard before. And once you know it day one, you start listening everywhere. You're like, oh my gosh, this word has been here the whole time and I never knew about it. New challenge unlocked. So I think that when I went through this process of registration and understanding, as you were saying, like having all the puzzle in order, because I had all these pieces together. I was like, yeah, it kind of looks like a shape of something, but couldn't really see the whole picture until I went through the process. And now I'm on the other side of, okay, I know how, all this puzzle is combined. It doesn't mean I cannot learn more. There are still lots of things to do. I'm still in the process of learning more, but definitely worth it for many reasons, like personal growth, professional growth. And I think, I would never regret it, like going through the process and say, yes, I actually could achieve my goal.
What was the most challenging thing in your registration process? So many. No, but if I have to choose one, doing it is in English as a second language was a big challenge. I believe that even though I reached fluent English or advanced English, it was something funny because the readings had a time saying 5 times. This will take you 5 minutes. It took me 20 minutes. And then I went, how am I going to finish this if a 5 minutes reading took me 20? And then I was just being patient to myself. I called all my friends and said, you're not going to see me until the end of this process. So I adjusted my life to make the most of the time to go through all the readings. That was one of the most challenging things. And the other one is, it was believing, because my journey in Australia wasn't easy, and it took me years to find my first job in the profession. I received so many rejections on the way that they made me feel, oh my God, I'm going to start another process of rejection and feeling questioned, and that your experience is not good enough, or your experience doesn't apply to architecture. Every recruiter was looking at my portfolio saying, where are the buildings, where are the houses, where are the high-rise buildings, and my experience was totally different. I've got 10 years experience, and 7 and a half of them have been in infrastructure. So that was a challenge for me, to say how I'm going to prove them that I'm eligible for this process. So I had a mentor who guided me through the process, and she encouraged me to say, your experience, or your whole experience, is worth it. Also, my move to the most traditional residential industry also helped me a lot. I think that was testing like making me feel, am I worth it? Am I good enough? Going through all of that and at the end having a successful outcome obviously make me feel that I can not only feel confident, but also make like the rest of my colleagues or peers saying, you can do it, it is possible. So I think it was
Yeah,
good.
I can relate. I think the language was a bit complicated, but I don't think only even for us. It was like, I think for a general comment for like even people from Australia,
Like native
that,
speakers.
native speakers that was doing this process is just terms, legal terms, like concepts that normally don't apply much to architecture.
Yes.
So all of that, try to wrap your head around that. And it's that architects were used to drawings, diagrams, and more drawings and sketches. And this is documents full of writing
Words.
and like words, and
By
you're like,
reading all the
why is
actions.
this happening to us? Yeah, I think it's just getting used to this completely different language. And also for me, the part that was more difficult was definitely the exam. Like it really felt like the questions were really, really tricky. Like all the answers looked right. Like what?
And the way the questions, even though I didn't have to do the exam, I read lots of the questions just to prepare myself for the interview. And the way the questions are set are almost to confuse you and make you
yeah.
think that there is one answer, but it is another one.
Yeah.
And because English is not our first language.
Yeah.
We don't always
definitely.
pick that.
That's right. Like that's another way of seeing things that make it like give an extra layer of complexity.
Definitely.
It's funny when you mention that because when I sat the test, I found some questions so simple that I was doubting
scary.
myself. Like, is it actually what he's asking or is tricking me?
You doubt yourself.
One thing that I found very challenging was to find the motivation to keep doing it, because you work and you are doing well at work, you have a good job, you get paid well, and you wonder why I am putting this myself through this. And I keep thinking to myself, this is actually self-inflicted. I'm self-inflicting this to me. I don't need to be doing it. So I will go through weeks that I was all motivated, doing it myself, find a way. And then another 3 months when I actually kind of didn't write a thing, didn't check anything. So I think what is important here is, even though the motivation comes and goes, the consistency has to be found somewhere, and make sure that this is what you want. This is not for everyone. This is one thing, but if you find yourself that this is what you want, do it and keep doing it and keep doing it. It's like going to the gym. It sort of sounds hard. You don't want to do it, but when you do it, you feel so proud.
And seeing the results.
And seeing the results is exactly that. So find the motivation, because sometimes it's not hard. When you start reading all the things that you will have to do, you feel very disencouraged, and you sort of make it think that it's not, what is the point, because you already have a job. But if this is what you want, I think try to find that consistency of at least book a little bit of time during the week to go for it.
And you had the extra challenge that you had your kids. And
So yes, it was kids and all that. And it's like, why? Like, honestly, I don't need it. I have to admit that I found my boss pushed me really hard to do it, because he was about to retire. And he was the only registered architect on that practice, meaning that I was going to be the next one in line, which is worse, because I went to the interview thinking, oh my God, what happened if I fail this interview? After they pay the whole thing, they give me time. It was a lot of pressure of making it happen, but finding someone that pushes you is a good thing. And I guess it made me be faster.
Yeah, I might add that it's not forever. Like registration
Correct.
is what, like
Yes.
6 months? 6 months, full on, done. So
Exactly.
yeah,
it is intense,
it's
but
intense,
it's-
but it's gonna be over.
Exactly. I think for me, the most challenging part, pretty similar to what everybody has said here, like working full time, then putting yourself into exhausting hours of reading. I have dyslexia, so I struggle a lot to read. I love reading, And sometimes some books or some things, I find it quite easy, but I couldn't do like you did. Like you had other challenges that probably with kids, I would never been able to do it. For me, I had to read hours and hours and hours and hours. And it was very hard to see my friends going out to the tennis or going here and going there. And they were like, are you still reading? Like, seriously? Like, yes, seriously. I have to read all these. And it was quite challenging to put my life in a pause because I'm quite social and active and I like doing lots of things. So I think the challenge is that, like, committing yourself to something and being constant. I always had that in my mind, like, okay, this is gonna last a certain amount of time. It's not gonna be forever. Also trying to be kind with myself. And I actually went through a process of asking for dyslexia,
I think they also have this, they can adjust if you have
The
any condition.
Yeah. That's what they did at the end.
That's great.
Because I actually needed that help. And I was thinking, well, is it because of my language barrier or whatever? It's not the English itself, it's my dyslexia. And I struggle sometimes in my own language. So how can I do that? Even if in my own language, I sometimes struggle with that reading thing, and then doing in a secondary language. And then you have to be able to, okay, on top of architecture and design and reading and law and everything, it was like too much for me. So I have to find the strategies or tools that could help me to get through it. And again, there are always options. Like, even if I thought it was gonna be impossible, well, it was possible. And that's a good way to say you can try, you can give it a go. My motivation was always like, I'm just gonna try it. Like, if I can't, it doesn't really mean anything, or it might mean for me because it's my time, but I have to find a way on how to achieve it. Like, there must be a way to do it. And it was.
Yeah, I remember going to the interview and saying that even if I didn't pass, just going through the process was entirely worth it, because you already got that knowledge.
Exactly.
You might have not got the right answer at that time, and that doesn't make you a failure.
Exactly.
But you still gained so much throughout the process and then one of the interviews said, everyone crossing that door have said exactly the same thing. So it is a common feeling that it is a challenging process, but it makes you glue together all your experience, and I think
exactly.
that's great.
And as you just said, like, I think at the end of the day, my head was always like, I want to go through the process just to understand, like, whatever I know until this point is with me. I know it. Maybe I will take, or I will need a little bit of extra time, but I have the knowledge. So yeah, that was one.
Yeah, I think also that lowers the anxiety of I need to pass. So yeah, it would be nice if we pass, if we get it, but if you don't, it's not that you are in zero. I think you still are at the point where you progressed in your career, and I think that's good.
Okay. What responsibilities are at when you get your architectural registration? In my situation, I'm more in charge of doing the coordination, and sometimes you also get more involved into the contract admin process, which is related to the contracts, or especially handling meetings and doing some more admin stuff, I guess. And also sometimes I get people to help me doing some of my drawings, but I have to now supervise and make sure the other person is providing also to the level of what we need to comply.
Can I use my overseas experience to do the APE? The short answer is yes. You have an allowance of certain amount of hours that you can log from overseas. I understand that this year, the process, you don't have to say if you were observer, participant, or executive. But when I did the process, when you logged experience from overseas, everything had to be on executive level, which I believe is what they are looking now, that there are no observer hours and more participant and executive. I will say that I will prioritize if you do have the 2 years experience that are required for this process in Australia with Australian projects, I will prioritize for them. If you have a very extremely interesting project from overseas that will be very valuable for the board to see, you can log the hours and talk about it. But I will say that to make the process seamless, better to prioritize with the Australian one.
Could I do the APE with intermediate English level? The short answer, I think not very possible. Like we were saying, it's really difficult. Like the language that is used is very technical, so it's gonna be very challenging if you don't have a good level of English.
Yeah, we can't say that it's impossible, but
it's not impossible, I guess. Like, yeah.
But even for English speakers, it was challenging. So that's for everyone to understand the level of complexity. It's many times not just about that I don't understand the word, but it's a legal term that comes with more legal terms and more legal terms, and that makes it difficult to understand it as a whole.
Sometimes I was feeling studying accounting and law and other things like, and then you realize how complex the architectural industry is, because you have all these other little bits and pieces, and then you believe like, oh, I only like drawing and designing, and then no, there's so much more that you need to learn.
I don't want to say it's impossible, but it might take longer. So I think if you have enough to prove that you know you have the knowledge and you know how to respond, great. But be mindful that you have certain amount of time and the situation or the examples are quite challenging. So consider that if on top of that you add the language barrier, then it's going to take too long. And that's when it says, oh, it's going to be really tricky. So you have to work hard on getting a good level of English first to get the rest.
Yeah, I was very proud when I finished the test and there was no one word that I said, oh, I couldn't answer because I didn't know the meaning of the word. And for me, that made me feel that I got it, And so yeah, it is a point to be considering.
And also in the part of the interview, because if you happen to pass the exam and the first round, or if you go through the experience, you maybe have enough experience to go through that path. But then if you still have an interview, they will give you certain scenarios where say like, oh, what happens if the client or the builder tells you this? And they push you quite a bit because they want to challenge you and see how you react.
Focusing first in getting into a fluent English to do the process, I think it will be the most
having an accent is fine, but knowing the terms is important.
Yeah.
How was your experience with the APE interview? So I will answer it under the eyes of the experienced practitioner, which I may have mentioned before that, as they said, it says that it tends to be difficult. I actually felt it was almost like a job interview. It was almost like a job interview in the sense that I had to go through all my projects, express the level of involvement that I have sort of done, and at the same time explain and align it with all the different competencies that I was sort of trying to prove. I think the expectations are quite high and the level of knowledge that they expect from you is very high. They are actually assuming that you have the experience and that you actually have completed all the things that you have said. So I felt that because I own the projects, they were mine, I have worked in them, I knew all the answers straight away. So I didn't think the interview was that hard. They are quite friendly, quite approachable. I think it's fine if the interview happens and you don't understand and you could say, can you repeat in other words, or may I ask you to say it again in a different context? All that will be fine. And the interview in general was, it's still tough and hard. There was no room for a lot of like improvising things, but in general terms, I think the experience was okay. I think if you were to ask me what was the hardest bit of the process, was that the interview. But as I said, it's a good way to sort of train yourself for what is to come if you are to find a job, I guess.
I was told It is just a conversation between colleagues, and but then my anxiety didn't let me just let it be super spontaneous. And on the other hand, we had a park saying, no, you need to study, you need to prepare, you need to know all these keywords and things like that. And I didn't believe it was going to be that challenging. It was very challenging. It was very long. It's supposed to be 50 minutes. Mine was like an hour and 20 minutes. I think to be safe, because you can have a board with like just a conversation about projects and things like that. But mine was very thorough.
Yes.
Throughout all the processes, all the keywords, because sometimes you can know the concept and think that you know how this works, but then they were asking for that specific concept. So yeah, I think there were moments where I felt that I wouldn't get through, but I did. I got the results, but it was challenging for me, and I did it through the APE with the doing the skills assessment and the logbook and all of that, and then I part 2 with the exam, the written exam, and then I did the interview. So I did show my experience as a more participant observer level. Also, my office wasn't involved in some processes that they consider important. So that's another thing to take into consideration. If your office is not providing full services, for example, you need to get exposed somehow or push that from your office.
What they explained to me that what I want to know is if you're going to be a risk for society. So what I'm trying to do is like sort of ask you these challenging questions, and they will actually be a question that you won't know, to see what you're gonna do, what's your reaction. And what I don't want to hear is that you just invent something, like you look like you know, but you actually don't. That's when you're like, oh, this person might be a bit risky. So like, because if you don't know, what you should answer is like, oh, I will ask a colleague, or I will refer to the board or advice by someone. So I think that's the main point of the interview. And that's why it's intense. Like they will push you a little bit in those questions and keep asking you maybe the same question 3-4 times to make sure that you don't like go answer something that is completely wrong.
What I was told that I think it is important to know is that when they cut you because they want to continue with the next question, doesn't mean that your answer is wrong. Might mean that your answer is completely fine, but they need to move forward.
Move on.
So yeah, don't be scared if they cut you and then you think, oh my God, I was talking nonsense.
I think similar scenario passed with me. Like they were like these two people, like one was a bit more tough, the other one was a bit more nice. When she was like nodding to my answers, I was like, oh yes, like I'm feeling I'm doing the right thing. And when they were not nodding at all, I was like, oh my gosh, am I okay? Like I tried just to calm, but it's quite intense because, as you said, I also had that situation where they were asking the same questions a few times, like in different ways, but I was like, didn't we just answer that one? Like they were asking, and there were things related to contracts and what if the builder asks or tells you to do, or so I was always very, I knew how to answer, and I was giving in my experience, this is what I do, or maybe if it would be my own company, I wouldn't do that, but in this company, for instance, one question was what type of contract they were using. But this client was not using a typical contract, and that's what I said. It's not one from the AIA or not from the builders. It's like they had their own. And we checked, we review. I've seen the contract, but I cannot tell you what contract it is. And then they asked me again, like, later on in a different way. And I was like, no, honestly, I don't know what kind of contract was that. Like, it's tricky in that way. It's intense, but yeah, in a way, they just want to make sure you know how to answer or how to say, no, I don't really know. Maybe ask somewhere else.
Not an expert, I will ask. I will get, a quantity surveyor or a lawyer or another colleague to advise.
which advice would you give to those that would like to register? Well, just do it. If you want to, if you want to get into it, get ready, get close to the community, like from ArLA, or to your colleagues or the people around, and ask the questions. Get close to the board as well, or ask questions to AACA. I think it's normal if you are afraid or if you are hesitant, but I mean, if you don't ask, if you don't start, you will never get there. I think don't be afraid of doing it, or do it even if you are afraid, but just keep walking, you know?
Have you thought of running your own business? How viable it is in general terms? I have thought about running my business, and I have to say that at some point in life, I did some private work outside my practice. And I feel that all goes back to what you want and what your expectations are. I will say that it's very viable, but also very stressful. And this always goes back to what you want in life. I think for me, where I was back then, I was a mom trying to make it work with not a lot of help here because my family doesn't live here. So I have my husband, who is very, very helpful, but just the two of us. So I felt that it didn't suit what I was doing at that point of time. Back then I needed the stability of a job that will give me an income and that will give me that consistency. So that was for me, and I thought about it. I don't think getting clients back then and all that was that difficult. I think it was doable, and I was busy enough, but it's a lot of work. Everyone thinks, it's be your own boss. That is necessarily not translated into the way that do less. It's actually do way, way, way more. But not to say that it's not possible, and not to say that it could be an answer for many. It just was that at that point of time in my life wasn't what I wanted or what I needed. And now that I am sort of quite comfortable in another place of work, I don't think myself, being me, will take it. I just feel that the level of stress will be too much for what I want in life at this point of time. So, but that's very personal, I guess.
Let's see. This is a long one. How was the process prior registration? That's one thing. And then, did you have to use overseas experience, or did you study a master's that helped you to validate your studies? In my experience, like we were saying, I studied in Mexico, so I didn't do any studies here. I didn't do the master's. I just arrived to Australia and started working in architecture. And after a while, I actually didn't know that I could validate my title. I think that's something that I wish I don't know, was involved in ArLA or something, so to know, because I was thinking like, I need to study a master's and then maybe I will be able to get registered and things like that. And actually didn't know about registration, so didn't know anything. And that was the idea at the beginning. And then after searching and looking in websites and AACA, it was like, I can actually just do the skill assessment and have my studies validated here. And that's what I did. And yeah, luckily things happened in my life that it was like, okay, I can stay in Australia. Let's do all the process and start developing my professional life as well.
And that was it. Thank you for watching the video. Please subscribe if you find this content valuable. Share it with the people that you believe they can take advantage of the information. Thank you so much.